Let's talk about reality. The reality is the Israelis are in a use it or lose it situation. For them, this is the decisive moment. If they can't keep us in this war and perpetuate this war long enough in their minds to completely and utterly destroy Iran, Israel, not Iran, it's Israel that won't exist. That's the real thing that nobody wants to admit inside the Israeli camp right now. Israel is in very bad shape. It's on fumes, as we would say. It doesn't have much more airspeed and altitude to lose. We are all they've got. And we, from the very beginning, have been operating as a branch of the Israeli armed forces. It's no accident that all the CENTCOM commanders rush over to, pay tribute to Mr. Netanyahu and receive their instructions. That's what's been going on for some time now. That was going on for years, but it's only now becoming painfully obvious. If they can't get the United States Armed Forces to stay engaged, Israel itself may go under, because Israel is not robust. Israel has lost a lot of people. It's the people around it have had it with Israel, and he may not be aware of this. Don't waste your time talking to the so-called elites in the Emirates and these other countries that are oil installations with flags. The Muslim Arabs who live in these countries hate the elites. The Muslim Arabs that are living in the Arabian Peninsula, they hate Israel, and they hate us because we make Israel possible. This is the truth. And Iran has no long-term interest in being at war with us. And oh, by the way, no one ever mentions Turkey. And the Turks deserve honorable mention here, because the hatred there is boiling over on the stove. The hatred for Israel and the anger with us. And this is not a new phenomenon, but it is at an all-time high. And there's a fear that if we pull out, that Israel truly will be on its own, and it won't be long before the Egyptians and the Turks and the rest of the Arabs close in. No one wants to go back to the previous status quo. All of them will tell you privately, Sykes-Picot is over. That's essentially the slogan in the Arab world now. The Sykes-Picot agreement is over. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get the Lebanese to bow down and be subjugated to Israel. It's not going to happen. So the point right now is very simple. The Israelis are going to do everything in their power to avoid any kind of agreement. They see an agreement of any kind as an existential threat to Israel. And at this point, I have to agree with them, because they've mishandled this whole thing in ways that I never thought was possible. For a group of people that are allegedly bright, they've been very, very stupid. They put themselves in a position from which they cannot get out. So the real question is not what he pointed out, which is we've got to stay there to prevent the Jews from being killed. I think the Jews know that, but that's not something that was inflicted on them. That was not the case years ago when this began, but it is now. And it's not necessarily going to be the Iranians that do it. So at this point, what can we do? We can stay permanently engaged in a war that we don't want, the world doesn't want, that's extremely destructive. Or you could have a miracle in Jerusalem, and somebody there could say it's time to completely change our government. We've got to go to a very different foreign and defense policy. Everybody who's here now, get out. We're going to start over. I don't think that's going to happen. Just as you point out, if you listen to Donald Trump, is he going to clean out the senior military and political advisors that are around him right now who've helped to deliver this disaster? I don't think so, but that's what he needs to do.
Well, it doesn't look like that there's going to be any near-term movement on that on the inside of the Israeli government. You mentioned this a couple of times here already. The headwind, maybe the biggest of all, is the Lebanon issue. And this was released, I guess, just yesterday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, and Northern Command Chief Rafi Milo held a conference call on Monday. And in a joint statement, they said the IDF will continue to act decisively to thwart threats to our soldiers and civilians, destroy terror infrastructure, and continue maintaining the security zone in southern Lebanon. The security of Israel's civilians and IDF troops will continue to remain before the eyes without compromise. An earlier ICC fugitive PM, this is what Dropside is referred to, Benjamin Netanyahu said, "My directive and the defense minister's directive for the IDF is clear and has not changed. Our fighters in southern Lebanon have full freedom of action to thwart any direct or emerging threat to them or to the resistance of the North. The IDF has no restrictions in this matter." And tell me if you disagree, but I mean, I think that was written not to the Israeli people, but to the Oval Office and President Trump. There are no restrictions. What do you say?
Well, I think we need to disengage from the war with Iran and make it clear that we do not support the mass murder or extermination of the people that live in Lebanon, because that's effectively what you're reading. You're talking about the Gazification of Lebanon. The Israelis truly believe that they can kill their way out of this situation. They don't seem to understand that taking that position is the surest way of Israel reaching extinction. You can't kill your way out of this. And to try is to make matters worse, not better. I don't know what else to say, Dan, but if you think you're going to kill your way out of Lebanon and turn it into another Gaza, you're in for a long wait. That's not going to work.
And, there's some bigger issues. Well, it's a big issue. President Trump, in his interview with Axios a week or so ago, was point blank asked, "Can you tell Israel to stop in Lebanon, and will they listen? Will they agree with you?" Here's
the relationship with Netanyahu's.
It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane.
Are you going to be able to control Israel from attacking Lebanon?
Yeah, I will be. I mean, they have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
They do as I say. That's what he said there. Now, apparently that memo and that soundbite did not get to Itamar Ben-Gvir, who said this on that topic.
אני חושב שעם כל הכבוד לטראמפ הוא לא הסיפור. הסיפור כאן זה בנימין נתניהו. ראש ממשלת ישראל הוא ראש ממשלה עצמאי. ישראל היא לא עוד כוכב בדגל האמריקאי, וראש הממשלה צריך לקבל את ההחלטות. וזה הרבה תלוי בביבי. הוא צריך לקבל את ההחלטות שאוהבים את הנשיא טראמפ, אבל פועלים בשביל החיילים שלנו, בשביל תושבי מטולה, בשביל תושבי קריית שמונה. אין מצב שאנחנו נתחיל לפעול לפי תכתיבים של ידיד, והוא באמת ידיד גדול. צריך להגיד את זה גם.
She said, for those who may not have been able to read it, he said, "Hey, we love President Trump, but we're going to act the way we're going to, and we're not going to let him give us dictates." So they're going to continue on there. So what does that tell you, Doug, when you look at all this together, the claims that we're making, that the Iranians have agreed to, the Iranians say, no, we haven't, Trump saying that I told Israel what to do, and Israel saying, yeah, whatever you said, we're going to do what we want to do. I mean, it seems to me that President Trump is getting shrunk further and further into irrelevance, even among the people he used to be able to tell things to.
I tell everyone that they should listen to Ben-Gvir. What he says is exactly the way the government thinks, and frankly, most Israelis think. And the expectation, though he did not state it, is that we are the servants of Greater Israel, and that we, our armed forces, will stay engaged until his view of the world is realized, Ben-Gvir's view, which is Greater Israel. That's what President Trump has to wrestle with. Can President Trump go and get a declaration of war against Lebanon, and for that matter, anybody else, including Iran or any other Arab country in the region, or even Turkey, to satisfy the demands of Ben-Gvir? Can he do that? Well, Ben-Gvir's attitude is we've spent 30 years buying up politicians. It's time for them to pay back. We've got the best government money can buy, and the government's being bought. End of discussion. So now it's time to pay back. If you take their money, they expect you to perform. And I think that's President Trump's problem with the Hill, to a lesser extent for himself, but he's also under duress. The people involved here, Dan, who are not under duress, they're called Americans. Us. We're not under duress. And we're preeminently concerned about the interests of the American people, their strategic interests, their security interests. And they do not equate the mass murder or extinction of people living in Gaza or Lebanon or Iran, or for that matter, anywhere else, with our national security. Doesn't work for us. Now, President Trump has to decide on what side of this he really is. Is he going to be the president of the United States, or is he going to be the principal representative to the American people of Israeli and international Jewish power? That's the question.
You know, Doug, there's been some public polling now, but I also have it on pretty good authority that that White House does its own internal polling that's not public, and that told them even several weeks ago pretty much what you just said there, that the general American population, even those in the MAGAverse, are starting to say, hey, this is a disaster. This war is a disaster. We should get out, and we should stop just reflexively giving in to Israel. That seems to have changed President Trump's vocabulary, things that he had been saying, because he, talking about, I tell them what to do, and oh, they're the little partner, a bunch of stuff like that. J.D. Vance has been going off on the circuit, hitting all kinds of podcasts and other interviews, saying a lot of the same things. Well, they're just a regular country. They're not this special thing. But so far, it hasn't been any action. Do you think that they will be able to, recognizing this shift that you just pointed out, that the administration, meaning Trump, will take action to finally put some teeth behind this? Or do you think it'll stay in the realm of rhetoric and that the Israelis will continue to do what they want with our stuff?
President Trump has demonstrated pretty conclusively that he really is a politician. And most politicians like to be a little bit pregnant. And what that means is that he is predisposed to try and find a position on all sides of the issue. He is not inclined to make a decision that could prove to be in any way, shape, or form what we would recognize as decisive. Now, could this change? Yes, I think it can. But then understand, when did the French Revolution actually get underway? It got underway when the people of Paris could not afford to. So what's the tripwire? If this continues and we continue to see violence and we continue to see the oil trickle out and we continue to see the deficits in urea and sulfuric acid and aluminum and a whole host of different critical minerals, all of which come out of the Persian Gulf, we begin to see countries that are suffering with famine. We begin to see our own people that are figuring out that it's not a question of demand destruction. That's nonsense. It's supply destruction. What happened to the supply chains? Where are the things that are normally on our shelves? When this kind of thing begins to happen, the pressure will be overwhelming. Now, I'd prefer the president not wait that long. I think it would be better for the president to act decisively now and say, that's it, we're out. And then turn to the Iranians and say, these are our interests, we're out, we respect your interests. This is how we see your interests. But that's not something that he's been trained and educated to accept. We historically as a nation were very popular in the world because we tended to respect other people's interests. When we finally became engaged in the world after World War II, when we did not return home, when we stayed all over the world, we were popular until communism was no longer a threat, and then we failed to leave. And that's when our popularity began to drop. And we should have left, but we didn't. And you have a similar situation in the Middle East right now. We can't protect these countries. The people that live there know that. We need to get out. And they need to get along with their neighbors. You and I have had these conversations in the past about Russia. The Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians would love to do to us what the Israelis have and drag us into a war that we don't need to fight against Russia. We're not going to do that, but we ought to be a little more straightforward with people and say, look, you live there, we don't. Get along with your neighbors.
Right.
Don't expect us to club your neighbors into position. Unfortunately, we are currently engaged in clubbing everybody into submission for Israel. It's not working. It's a catastrophe for us and for the world. I think President Trump knows that, but he's under duress. He can't simply pull the plug.
Well, one thing that might push him in that direction, I mean, Gary was showing that polling there a second ago that Newsweek had up there, and we mentioned a couple of others. But there has been some additional movement on and we'll just look at the Republican side of this. I mean, he's starting to burn his own house down. I mean, we saw what happened with Thomas Massey, and I mean, he pulled out all the stops and tens of millions of dollars from all kinds of people to make sure he didn't get reelected in his primary election already. So he's got that, but that came at a cost. Well, now in just the last 24 hours, Tucker Carlson came out and said, hey, I don't even consider myself a part of the Republican Party anymore. I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not going to be. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but he said, I'm really against this. And it turns out he's not the one. Marjorie Taylor Greene posted this. I guess this was just yesterday afternoon. Tucker is not the only one who's not supporting the Republican Party. There is a lot, she says, of us that are absolutely fed up and will not support a party that betrays its voters and country. But that does not mean we're turning Democrats either. But we are done with the America Last Republican Party. Now, these are minor figures here. How do you see this trend going? And might that finally get President Trump's attention to say the cost to his own party could be higher, especially heading into November, than the cost that if he goes against the Israeli side and goes for American interests?
I don't think he's worried. I don't think that's uppermost in his mind. I think he's worried about other things. I think he's very worried about his obligations to the Jewish lobby and the Israeli state as a consequence, and the people that supported him for election, the billionaires. So I don't think that's going to mean very much to him. Now, for the rest of us, I think it's not just the Republicans. The Democrats have moved so far to the left in support of everything that's anti-American that there are large numbers of Democrats who want nothing more to do with the Democratic Party. And you've already shown us what's happening with the Republicans. I think the two-party system as we've known it is collapsing. It hasn't happened visibly, but we're going to see more and more evidence for it in the months and years ahead, which is why, as you know, I support the creation of a third party, a nationalist party, an American First Party, an American Freedom Party. That's what we need, where we are preeminently concerned about American national security, national defense, national identity, national culture, national history. And of course, this is anathema to people on the left. It's anathema to some of the people in the Republican Party that have been supporting the Israel lobby for years. They're not very different. I think we're in a period where everything's just going to change. Now, what happens to President Trump along the way? You know, as things get as bad as I think they could over the next few months, there'll be a lot of pressure to remove President Trump from office. And I think it's going to happen.
That's a pretty bold statement. How might that happen? I mean, what would that look like?
Well, I don't think it'll happen because of the cabinet. It should. That's where the vice president should be the man who walks and said, listen, you know, you've done enough damage at this point. Damage to the nation, damage to the world. We can't sustain any more damage. So now you have a choice. Either you get on board and shut up and help us disengage from this war, or I'm going to remove you. And that means the majority of people in the cabinet vote for his removal. There's an amendment that provides for that power. I don't see that happening, Dan. Do you?
No, because President Trump made sure that he had the most loyal people at all those positions. So it would have to be really bad for them to turn. Although I think that it's in their minds some now that it used to not be.
Yeah, but you say loyal. I just think people that are acutely lacking in genitalia, they're not loyal. These are people who are fearful.
Fair enough.
And will sell out in order to get where they are. And they've done that to get where they are, by the way. So I don't think that's the issue. So it's more likely to come as a result of an impeachment. And that could get very ugly, but that could happen sooner than we think. It could drag into next year, in which case it happens with the next Congress.
But yeah, I agree with you, Doug. Especially if the economic situation starts to crater, and and you can draw a direct line to the war that we started here. I mean, even Republicans, whatever they may want to do, talk about members of Congress and the Senate, I don't think they would be able to vote against an impeachment move if that's what the American people come to believe.
Well, that's right. And I think that's something that you and I can't foresee with absolute precision.
Yeah, definitely not.
But I think that's the critical variable. And it's interesting that President Trump has finally admitted it publicly. I mean, I've been saying for weeks, we risk a global depression unless we can arrest these tendencies right now. And he said finally, while he was in Versailles, global depression. Thank God, you know? Well, then, Mr. President, you figured it out. Disengage.
Yeah.
Get out. There is a military solution. It's called disengage and get out.
And you know, Doug, President Trump is the most skilled person I've ever seen in my lifetime. This is not always a good thing, but he does have the skill. He can flip his position on a dime 180 degrees and convince his supporters that it was a good idea all along. He's the one guy that can say, yeah, I know we were fighting this war and I said all this stuff, but this is what we need to do. And that's what I'm going to do for the good of our country. And I think that he would get a significant portion of those supporters to stay with him, as opposed to going down this path and pretend that these pressures aren't coming, and then he could lose them all.
Well, right now he's in the danger zone that Richard Nixon found himself. And Nixon ran on a platform of ending the Vietnam War. When he first met with the Joint Chiefs in 1960, they all said, yeah, let's get out. There's no victory here. There's nothing to be won. This whole thing has been bungled. The best thing we can do is leave. And then he was persuaded in private by Henry Kissinger that if we did that, we would look weak in the eyes of the Soviets, and that could have consequences. And so out of this misinterpretation was hatched this tragedy called the intervention in Cambodia. And the Cambodia campaign was pointless. It further disrupted and destabilized the region, killed more Americans after Nixon took over than were lost before he got there. He postponed the inevitable end. So President Trump needs to sit there and think this through, or at least sit with someone who can help him think it through, not the people that have been advising him to this point, because that's not what he wants to do. Don't wait for it to get worse. That's what Nixon did. It got worse. It's time to get out now.